Elvis Costello.
Yep.
Oh, I hate Elvis Costello.
A little Elvis Costello bringing us out of the break. For you, sidekick.
Ugh.
Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950.
Worthless.
On AM 950 and DougPagittRadio.com.
All right, Doug. So we're just going to talking about evangelism because you have a book coming out called Evangelism in the Inventive Age.
Came out. Available now.
Available.
Your finest book retailers.
Mm-hmm. And is it available on ebooks and that stuff?
It is. It is available in digital formats.
Oh, all formats?
I don't know.
For all devices?
I don't know that.
Okay.
Why does anybody have anything but an iPad? I don't know. I mean, this is ridiculous that people have to run around and get these other formats. But anyway.
Okay, so there's this this old, long dead preacher who a lot of evangelicals like, named Charles Spurgeon. Mm-hmm. And he says that the problem is not with getting people saved, mm-hmm. which is means to have them, convert to Christianity. Mm-hmm. But the problem is getting them lost. Okay, it's like in convincing them that they need God.
Yeah.
How do you address that in evangelism in the Inventive Age?
Is he still alive?
No, he's
dead. Well, then don't believe that stuff. See what happens to you if you believe that.
He's been dead like for 100 years.
Well, see, yeah, I wouldn't go believing that stuff.
Because it's old.
Well, no, because you die if you believe that. Yeah, I know. That's his argument. His argument is if you don't present the problem to someone, then how could you present the solution?
Yeah.
And if you think about religion and Christianity as being a solution provider, then that's what you have to do, is you have to create a problem so that you can be the one who bears the solution.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, people have been doing this for 2,000 years.
Sure.
Have been recasting Christianity as the worst possible situation so that I can provide for you the best possible situation. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't recognize, it recognizes only that you have an equation that doesn't already fit someone's life. So now you have to convince them of your equation, as opposed to starting with where the person is. It begins with the assumption that God is somehow absent from a person that you're going to be talking to, and you have to get them to recognize that. I mean, it's to my mind, it should be dismissed on a variety of levels. Right. The first of which is this notion that there are people who are absent of God. Mm-hmm. That's curious to me. And that the way you become unabsent of God is to think something. Mm-hmm. That somehow if you think it, then you are no longer absent of God. That this God who is absent from you will no longer be absent from you if you think the right things.
Wait a minute. Let me put my cleats on because we're definitely starting on the slippery slope here for you.
Oh no! This is the full wet and wild. Supposed to be, because that notion is silly. The solution to the notion is silly, which is how you know that the problem is silly. You can tell a silly problem when someone's solution to it is a silly solution. And the silly solution, and I don't mean that in any disparaging way, I guess I only mean that in a disparaging way, is that you can think your way into God being present in your life. Think the right things about your past behavior. Think the right things about God. Know something in your brain, and that changes your ontological position with God, to borrow the philosopher's terms. Silly business.
I mean, has that notion always been around, or is that like a late invention?
It is. It's been around within a certain stream. In the early in the early Common Era, the 100, 200, that was called Gnosticism. Gnostic meaning to know, that you would know certain knowledges, you would know certain information, and that would give you access to spiritual planes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's silly business. It's we really should reject. What we can say is, hey, when I know certain things, it allows me to live in certain other ways than I was living, and I can then have a different pattern in my life. But that knowledge would somehow invoke the Lord of creation to be engaged in your life or to treat you differently is really a concerning thought. That your belief system, rightly held, would be somehow deciphered by God, and then God would be present with you, where God would be absent from you in light of that bad thought. And then you can push it one step further. If you're absent of God, how then would you ever have the capacity to have the right thought? So let's stop with this notion that there are people or places that are absent of God. And let's talk about the fact that we can live in hostile environments with ourselves or with our loved ones or with God. And what should change that are all the dynamics that play out in your life. But the idea that you're absent of God and therefore God becomes present with you really does need to be abandoned. It's simply untenable.
So, are you comfortable committing the sin of 1,000 heresies? I mean,
I'm quite comfortable with that. So, and it kind of plays out like this. My friend, that I mentioned to you, that said the thing about the problem with Christians isn't that we don't love enough. The problem with Christians is that we don't like the people that we say that we're loving. Mm-hmm. Then he flips it around one more time, or he did, or I did. I can't remember. One of the two of us in this conversation flipped this around. I think it was him, so I'm going to blame it on him for a minute. And then he says, and then the other problem that we have is that we don't let other people love us. We worry too much. Will they like us? We don't let them love us. Because when you're loved by someone, you have to take on the posture of humility. You have to be the one that's humble because you are at the mercy of that person's care and love for you. So he says one of the problems with impassioned religious people is that they tend to think about the other people as someone they love but don't like, and they're unwilling to be loved by that person, only to be liked by that person. He says we have to flip it around and stop worrying, do we love them enough, and start liking them, and stop worrying if they like us and allow them to love us. In fact, the way you engage with someone who's different from you in their thinking or in their understanding or their engagement is to appreciate them and to let them love you. So the evangelist then would have to be open to being loved by the one that they are evangelizing. And instead, we tend to get this thing wrong and say, I can't approve of your life. I don't care for your life, but I love you. But do we open ourselves up to say, do you know me? Can you have your best interest in me at heart? Can you be someone that is one who I know loves me? If I'm going to evangelize you, will I allow you to love me? Or will I simply present myself as someone for whom you can, appreciate me or thank me or something along these lines?
Well, in order for that to happen, you would have to care and be willing to enjoy that other person more than you executing your responsibility of delivering this message or of being the evangelist.
Right. I mean, think about the most important people in your life. They're people who not only love you, they're people who like you and appreciate you and desire to be to find the things that you find valuable. It is remarkable to me how many people are willing to engage in an evangelistic pursuit. And in this, we've been talking a lot about religious evangelism, which is a very important one, but don't actually care for the person they're evangelizing. Now you're just a salesman. Now you're just pitching. Now you're just saying, I'm showing up at your door and I've got a product that's going to solve a problem that you didn't know you had. And that's, we function in a complex society where we have to have people who do that, but that's just not that's not the same thing as someone engaging in a meaningful interaction with you.
So, how does your book deal with the idea that the world is evil? Okay.
Yes.
All right. And the church is this, safe oasis, guarded by God. So we must protect, the church for evil encroaching upon the church. So when we, look at the world as this very, very, bad place, thus all of those people are just lost and devoid of God. How does your
how's my argument in the book Evangelism in the Inventive Age, available at all the fine book retailers
and on e-stuff?
How does it deal with that question? It begins with the assumption, and I say this very clearly in the book, that my argument from here will go forward saying that there are no places that are absent of God. It's one of the reasons that we've been talking for a couple of years in this show that I don't believe in miracles, because the definition of a miracle is that God is absent from somewhere and then shows up there. And I don't think there's anywhere in the cosmos that God is absent of. So the way people talk about miracles is that the rules are broken. God wasn't there and then God shows up and now is there, and that's the miracle. As opposed to, there is no place that's void of God. And when wonderful, good, right things happen, we shouldn't act as if all the laws of the cosmos have been broken. That the miraculous is not bringing. And that same notion has to play out in evangelism. What I would suggest we should be talking with people about is the reality of God's engagement in, through, and with all things. And that's the big shift for a lot of people. And so people have often said, and the reason I wrote a book on evangelism, they've said, well, if I buy that notion, which a lot of people I hang around with are like, I kind of like that better. I like the idea that there is no place where there is not God. That there are no privileged places that have God and no forsaken places that don't. No blessed people, no forsaken people. This kind of thing. Then everything's up for grabs, right? Because the feeling is, well, if you don't have this other crisis at hand, then what do you have to offer? What do you have for people? What is there then?
Well, that would definitely deflate so much of this, just aggressive Christian, message against homosexuality or this or that, because they view this as, an encroachment or an advancement of Satan's plan against the church.
And the reason that I'm a Christian still is that in Jesus's call, that's what I find. That Jesus comes along and says, in his day, there were those who organized the world into places where there was God and place where there wasn't, to the blessed and the forsaken. And in that situation, we read in the Gospels Jesus saying, no, the kingdom of God belongs to the poor, not just to the blessed. The kingdom of God is not only in the temple, it's also in Galilee. That the kingdom of God is no less in the one affected by illness than in the one who has been healthy all the time. That is the commentary of first century categories of Jesus saying, I think, this same argument. There are no places where there isn't God. There is no place you can go. And I find that actually all the way through the Hebrew and Christian writings is this same call. Where could one go that they would be out of the care of God? There is no place, no height nor depth, all that kind of poetic language, I think, is trying to argue the same thing.
Well, so then what do you do with like the kind of explicit commands of Jesus in the Bible to go and to preach the gospel to all of the nations? Well, if God is everywhere, then what's the point in that?
Because the gospel is to remind people that God is everywhere and accessible everywhere, and not everyone organizes themselves that way. So we remind people, we proclaim. That's what God's message is. There is no place you can go, no place that you would be absent. God will never abandon any of creation. Pretty good. Doug Pagitt Radio on AM 950 over there at DougPagittRadio.com. We're back after the break.